Welcome to another episode of Successfully Live. I'm Adam O'Donnell, the co-founder of Successfully. Today, I'm excited to be here with Greg Daines. Greg is the CEO of Client Velocity. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Adam.
Definitely. So Greg has been in customer success for most of his career. He's also started many companies and had a successful exit. He also got his MBA from MIT and has recently been the VP of Client Success at Inside Sales. So we have just he has an incredible amount of experience and knowledge. The reason I want to talk to you today is just after meeting you at CS 100 and watching your presentation, it just was incredible. And it brought a lot of new perspectives around churn and why it's so hard and kind of the way that you've been able to solve for that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Kind of tell me your story. Like when did you start to realize, and really dive into what creates churn so you could help solve for that?
Like many people, I've been come directly to customer success. Like you said, I was a founder, CEO, always SaaS, always B2B. And, lots of new experiences for people like that, including raising money and designing products, selling, building an organization, et cetera, et cetera. But, after I'd done it for a while, had a couple of companies, I did take a break and kind of stop to think about what was the most interesting aspect to me, because I definitely wanted to do with my career the thing that I find the most interesting. And when I did that, no sooner had I asked the question of myself than I knew the answer. And it was because, the hardest problems in my view are the most interesting ones. And it was clear immediately what the hardest thing I had done. Of all those things, all of which were hard and challenging and great learning experiences, nothing was harder to me, more consistently, challenging to everything that we did than trying to consistently make your customer successful on your solution. And no sooner had that occurred to me than I realized this is actually the most interesting problem. And of course, in the process of doing that, I also met a lot of companies and knew a lot about many companies that led me to believe it was also a challenge for a lot of other companies, not just something we struggled with, but actually something that's pretty challenging across the board. And so I knew that was something I definitely wanted to focus on.
Yeah, so it just fired you up, and I mean, the people that watch this all probably agree with you. We're all resonate with that, like just massive challenge, which fires us up to solve it. I mean, can we just dive right in? Like, I got to know some of the big insights that you figured out to help do that.
I had this experience, and it was pretty consistent, same thing over and over again. I'd have a challenge, right? We'd have something where we were struggling with a client, and we could see their difficulty with something, and I'd go out into the world looking for wisdom, looking for help and great ideas. I'd find out what that kind of best practice thinking was. I'd bring it back and it wouldn't work. And that happened over and over and over and over again. And, in many cases, these were things that everybody knew to be true. And so they were kind of, it led to this it's repeated experience of me thinking there was something wrong with me, or there was something wrong with our solution, or there was something wrong with our customers. And this is something I hear a lot now that I'm in the consulting practice. I hear this a lot from my clients. What's wrong with us? Actually, what most companies are experiencing is really common, almost to the point of being universal. But anyway, I had that experience over and over again. And I'm dense, so it took me a long time. But eventually I kind of came to understand, actually, there's something wrong with some of the ideas out there that we take for granted, that we take as universal truths in the world of business and customer success. And eventually I came to understand, that doing what everybody else does gets you what everybody else gets you. And there's something about kind of the conventional, approach out there. And so I like to say, conventional approach gets you conventional results. And that was my experience. So in every case where we were running into that, I was having to kind of stop and unpack it and say, well, what's really going on here? Because the simple formula didn't work. And in every case, it led me eventually to some insights, which I think are pretty profound and map across a lot more than just my experience.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it makes sense. And we've all felt that. It's like we went to this conference, we've read this blog post, we've listened to these podcasts and we've applied it, but it just didn't manifest in the way that it was sold to us almost, or we bought this software, we've hired this consultant. So what are some of the things that we need to look for? Like what works? Like tell us, we're on the edge of our seat here.
But sometimes it's easier to start with talking about what doesn't work. So, for instance, there's this idea out there, and it's so universal. I don't even know if anyone dares question it, but I'm out there, on a daily basis talking about this to people, and it's amazing how they resonate with it. And it's a simple idea. It's happiness doesn't pay. A customer strategy based on driving high levels of customer satisfaction, delight, joy, however you want to say it, does not consistently produce the results we expect. I've experienced it. A lot of other people have experienced it. You go out, you measure your customer NPS, you drive it up 20 points, you get it better, and your churn rate stays the same. What gives? And I talk to people. I do a lot of these presentations, but it was my own experience. So I say, customer success. People out there, raise your hand if you've had this experience. You've recently had a customer leave you, but on the way out, they say really nice, glowing things about what a great experience it was, right? Or conversely, raise your hand. I mean, every hand goes up, right? Keep your hand up if you have a customer who's constantly unhappy, always dissatisfied, frustrated, burning your phone down, etc., and yet they keep renewing year after year. I mean, what gives, right? This is contradicting something we just know to be true, and yet there's tons of other evidence out there that, in fact, a strategy based on customer satisfaction does not drive high levels of retention. Not for the periods that are relevant in SaaS, right? It's 4, 5, 6, 7 years of retention, and there's a lot of reasons for it, right? We have the reality that at least in B2B, our customer is not a person, it's an organization, and people change in that organization. So I'm going to have to keep repeating that experience. There has to be something more durable, more, more enduring than the emotional experience of one or two people that we deal with. And so this was one of those things where it was just like, oh my gosh, we're all saying something, and yet actually there's a lot of counter evidence for that. Most people can relate to is this frustrated customer that just keeps renewing in spite of all their complaints.
We know this, but yet we still strive for that. It's like I'm sure when you ask the audience to raise their hand, who here has had a satisfied customer leave, every single hand goes up. But yet we still strive for satisfaction. So it's like, what are we doing? But we don't know anything else, and we feel like it has a correlation. I just, it's funny because we actually, one of the cohorts at our last SaaS company, we actually analyzed it, and there was an inverse correlation to high NPS and retention. It basically saying like the higher the NPS, we found that a lot of those people left because they were just like, oh yeah, it's good. Like they hadn't really tried it. They were just kind of being nice. The ones who gave us the harsh feedback were the ones who really wanted to get something out of the product, and they were striving with us, and they were the ones who stayed because they had a real problem and it wasn't working perfectly for
If you
things.
think
Yeah.
about it, what's a customer signaling when they're unhappy, when they're frustrated, when they're calling to complain? What they're signaling is they're engaged, right? And actually, a lot of your high promoter score customers are not very engaged.
It's because they're just being nice people, and it's easier to do that than if they say a low score. Then they're going to get reached out to. They have to deal with that. Man, I hear it. What's the next fallacy that you've kind of found?
That one was a big breakthrough and allowed me to start examining some of the other kind of sacred cows in the world. And the next one was really hard for me as a founder, okay, because I got into the world of tech and entrepreneurship and all this stuff based on my belief in software. Software is really powerful. Software is eating the world. I personally think software in many ways is going to transform the world as much as a lot of other positive forces. So I'm a big believer in it. So this one was tough for me. And it was basically this: your technology produces no value. And it took me a long time to kind of come to terms with that. And here's how I figured that out. If I turn my software on or my solution on for any client and nothing else changed, they'd get no value. And that was really kind of the seed that led to me starting to examine just the whole relationship between technology and business success, right? In theory, our solution exists to make that client more successful. But in fact, it turns out that none of the value of that solution can be realized unless the customer changes how they work. I haven't yet found, and I've worked with now dozens, hundreds of companies, I haven't yet found a solution that produces value without any effort or any change or any process improvement on the part of the customer. And so it really came eventually to make sense to me. And I think this is something people need to take, you know, into their practice. There's a lot of practice implications for this, that essentially the technology enables a lot of benefits, but those benefits won't be realized until the customer changes their business process, their decision paradigm, their practices, their workflow. Those changes are actually more often than not the difference between customers who succeed and customers who fail with the solution. You talk to CSMs, they know about it, right? This customer never made the changes I suggested. Of course, they're going to churn eventually. They know it before it ever happens, right? Whereas here's a customer not only made the changes, but enthusiastically reaches out for more advice on how they should operate their business, even beyond the scope of our solution. Well, they are going to succeed, right? That's one of the best leading indicators of success there is. So that was really the second one was, oh my gosh, the technology, no matter how much value it's capable of producing, will not be realized until the customer changes how they work.
Gosh, I mean, that is, yeah, that's so painful, right? Because we spend our whole careers and everything we do is to build the technology, and we're so excited and impressed with our own technology, and that's not what does it. And when you first said that, I was like, wait a second, like, come on, I could think of some things, but even the things that are most automated, they require some kind of effort and commitment. And if that's not changed in some way, but the majority of B2B software, let's be honest, is not that. It takes change management, it's us using it, it's workflow and all of that. It's all about the change. That makes a lot of sense.
And if your software, your solution requires more change, one of the big opportunities you may find for customer success is to look for ways to improve the software in ways that require less behavior change or automate some of that. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the whole software space looking forward for companies to find ways to automate things they're currently only enabling. And I think that's that's another trend I think that I see that's going to drive, higher levels of customer success.
Definitely hear that. Just had an episode with Dave Jackson in the UK, and he's come out with this series called Customer Success 2.0. And it's the idea of like, don't just solve within customer success, like the department. We've got to look at the product because sometimes that's 10 times better at solving the thing that a customer success manager is going to do, because no one wants to talk to your CSMs just to talk to them. They're doing it for an outcome. So if you can solve that in a quicker way, then let's do it.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, definitely. So, and what's the third one? You said the next fallacy?
The next one kind of falls out of the last one, and it hit me pretty strong once I understood that behavior change was essential for technology success. And then this one kind of rounded out the set, which is people don't actually want your product anyway. Actually, they don't. What they're doing is they're trying to solve a problem. In Clayton Christensen terms, they're hiring your product to do a job for them. And I think that's a really profound insight that he had, and it relates a lot to customer success. Because, I mean, who wants to buy software, right? Raise your hand if you want to, source it and review it and purchase it and administer it and configure it, and right? Nobody wants that. What they want is the result that it drives for them. It's like that famous saying, nobody wants a quarter-inch drill; they want a quarter-inch hole,
Theodore
right?
Levitt.
And
Yep.
and in reality, a lot of times we're so in love with our technology from the last point that we think that's what people want. Also, we have a lot of conversations around the technology. People come to us and say, hey, we need this feature, we need this capability. So we talk to them about the feature or the capability, and then we sell them the product, and then they implement the feature or capability. But what hasn't happened in all that process is they haven't locked in what's the fundamental paradigm or parameter of success that all of this is supposedly driving. It's all been left kind of unspoken, right? And when we get down the road, they've implemented the feature, but does anyone really understand why? We needed to be much more disciplined around that. And that's one thing that this kind of insight led me to was, gosh, we love our technology. We know what it can do. If they're going to change their behavior, we have to change our behavior. And, you think about it, we think in terms of driving outcomes for our customers. We think about their success, but do we really measure it? You think about the things we measure, retention and expansion and NPS and customer sat. None of those are actually a direct measure of the customer success. They're a measure of our success. And I really think this is where the mind shift, once you've been through like 3 of these kind of major mental shifts, you eventually get to a point where you realize, actually, it's not about our product. It's not about what we do. It's about what the customers do. It's not about how much value we get. It's about how much value they get. And that transformation, it seems obvious, but a lot of the things that we do, from marketing and sales and product development and onboarding, et cetera, are really all wired around a different mentality. And I think that's where that mental shift led me to what was really a different kind of thought process. And that is, I kind of feel like we're asking the wrong questions to begin with. And rethinking how we frame the questions around customer success has actually been, in some ways, the most valuable thing that I've been able to do.
Happiness doesn't matter. Our product doesn't really matter, and they're not buying. Yeah, or our product doesn't create value, and they're not even buying our product to begin with. Like, there's got to be a lot of people listening here just like, what are we doing? Like what can I even do? What where should we go from here? So you got to pick us back up, like help us know how to solve for this. Like, how have you found that? What should we be striving for?
Yeah, great. So I think what we kind of do is, this isn't very explicit, but I think this is essentially the way we think about it. We build a business and we kind of solve for, on one side, why do customers buy, right? What's driving their buying behavior? What gets them in the door? What closes the deal? And then at the other end, we kind of solve for, why do they leave? And the idea is, once we solve for those two things, in theory, we're accumulating customers here in the middle, right? And that's growth for our company. But in a lot of ways, these are both the wrong questions. So really, really quickly, what's wrong with this question? Well, you can solve for why people buy, uh, and a lot of those people can churn out. In theory, you could actually find something that you say, magic words that cause a lot of people to buy, that have nothing to do with what we do, how we drive value, how we create value for them. And so solving exclusively for why they buy can lead you in the wrong direction. And it's likewise true with asking and answering the question, why do they leave? Because one of the things that I say is, actually, customers don't leave because they have a reason to leave. They leave when they no longer have a reason to stay. So actually, I think the real question, and I think it's very actionable, I want to get to some practical implications of this. I think the real question that matters is the question in the middle that we're not asking, which is, why did customers stay? In the SaaS world, right, everything's about why they stay. Everything's about how long they stay and how much they buy. If you think about it, just selling them, it's like we got them into the mall, but almost all the money they ever make for us will be because they stayed in the mall and purchased. And so what we really need to do is figure out, how do we optimize around the dynamics and the cause of customers staying. So that's where my practice kind of jumps off. And one of the things that I learned was, we don't ask that question explicitly often enough. And when we do, it's surprisingly insightful. It leads to all sorts of very simple, actionable insights that anybody, I think, can work with. So, for instance, if you have a decent data set on your customers, even if you're brand new, you can start to ask this question quite explicitly of the data, right? Of the customers we've had, including the ones who've left and those who've stayed, what do we know about those who stayed? And it's surprising, right? Because we think we know what our solution's for. We think we know what people do with it. We built it, after all, and we told them what to do with it. But in reality, there's some subtlety there. And when you watch at a much more detailed level your customers operating in your solution, you can begin to see really interesting insights about what are the differences between the customers who stay and the customers who leave. And one of them goes back to, the ones who stay are the ones who change their process. But there are a bunch of others. And in particular, there are things about companies that we can learn very quickly with not that much data, for even a young company, to start to tune in our process, our product, our sale, our marketing message, and of course our onboarding and customer success motion around what are the things driving customers to stay for longer periods of time.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's just rephrasing the question, and because we all ask the why did they leave? Like, that's the question we always ask. We're always trying to figure that out, but that's not the right answer. And I definitely see that, because if you know why they stay, then you can continue to map that pattern and apply it to all the other customers. And yeah, that makes sense. And what are some of the other big ones you found?
Well, some of the biggest things that you start to discover when you ask that question is, use case matters a lot, actually. And I say use case, some people like the jobs to be done framework, but it's sort of, what was the core business priority that drove the customer, right? If we assume they're not buying a drill, but they're really looking for a hole, What is it? Characterize it more detailed. And what you find is there's some heterogeneity there. Even customers who look like and maybe even talk like they were doing the same thing had differences, sometimes subtle, sometimes pretty profound, in what they hope to achieve. Well, obviously it matters a lot what they hope to achieve, because we may or may not be effectively driving to the thing that mattered to them. Our product may not even drive the kind of value they were expecting. So getting alignment around their use case or their job to be done or their core primary business objective is really one of the most important things you can do. If you know which ones are high retention or what I call high affinity, they're a really good fit for what we do, how our product creates value, and how good we are at helping customers achieve it. If they're high affinity, we can immediately action that, right? Marketing can go out and try to drive more leads that look like that. They can tune their marketing to get a lot more of those kind of customers in the door. We can sell better to those benefits. One of the biggest mistakes in customer success doesn't even occur in customer success. It happens in sales, and it's called feature selling. Selling features instead of selling benefits. If you don't tune and connect, deeply with that customer's primary business objective, it's very unlikely we'll ever agree later down the road that it was achieved. And so that's really important. If we know those high affinity use cases, let's make sure we're selling to them. Let's make sure we're guiding customers to think that way, so that when we deliver, it's clear to everybody we achieved it. So that's one of the biggest ones, and obviously there are other ones, but that's a big one.
How do we understand the real use case that they hired us for? What do you have any simple processes? I mean, I'm familiar with jobs to be done and unpacking that, but that takes time. Is there a quick way that we can do it other than just like, why did you buy it? Because that's probably not going to give the answer.
Most of my clients haven't been asking that question in the correct way that we could trust the results in the sales process. If you have, then great, you should leverage that and do some data analysis around which ones have higher affinity. More likely than not, you haven't been. And there's a simple solution. Uh, Call up your most successful customers and ask them what their primary business objective was. One of the mistakes we make is that kind of exit analysis thing where we look at all the customers who churned and we ask them why they churned, and then we make a big pie chart and it has 19 slices, and we go after the first three slices, the big ones. And every time I've done that, and I've made this mistake multiple times, I've done that. We crush a couple of those big slices, and guess what? Churn stays the same. And it's really interesting. It turns out, yes, the customer will tell you what the immediate cause of death was. What was the thing most of the time they'll be pretty clear about that. The problem is, if the ultimate cause is whether or not they change their process, then they're actually not authoritative on the thing that matters most. They're not actually good at understanding even themselves what the main factor was. So I actually don't like to look at failed customers as a primary guide. I think that's driving in the rearview mirror, and it's a little bit backwards. What I like to do is identify 5 or 10 of our most successful customers, the ones that are crushing it. Happy or not actually doesn't matter. I'm not looking for happy customers. I'm looking for customers who would swear this thing has made them more money or made them more successful or something. And then I want to go talk to them. And the questions I ask are very detailed, and they're designed to get them to talk about the core business problem that they were solving, or the business need, or the opportunity they were going after in business terms. So if they say, yeah, well, we needed a solution to, solve this technical problem and enable this behavior, or build these graphs, or whatever it was, then I say, oh, great, that's important. What was driving that? What was the value, you were trying to get at? What business problem was it solving? How much was that worth? And usually you can guide customers into being, pretty clear. I would always want to talk to someone who was part of that original decision. But it's amazing. You do 5 or 10 of those interviews, and it's incredible how much texture and detail you get around what's really driving people's engagement with our solution. And are we delivering that? Are we tuning everything we do to make sure that that gets delivered?
That's incredible. We we actually did that with our last company. We use this process called switch interviews, which is rooted in jobs to be done. The Rewired Group came out with it. They're a consulting firm out of Michigan, but it basically just helps you understand the story of why they purchased. So you're understanding, like, there's always, they're thinking about it because they had kind of the problem, and then an event one happens and they're actively searching, and then event two happens and they buy. And those events, like the thing that like we have to do it, that helps you really uncover why. And for us with our last company, it was super clear. It was, they had a blow up on social media where parents saw something that went viral at the school. The president came to them and said, what's happening? You're in charge of this department. how did this happen? And within a week they bought. It's like, so then that helped us know the successful ones, they're hiring us as an insurance policy, as opposed to the other ones who are like, oh, we're just looking for kind of feedback and we just wanted to do market research. Completely different job. So I 100% hear that.
That's a terrific example. And the other thing, doing these detailed interviews, usually they only take half an hour. The other thing you can find out, and it's very actionable, very simple, is to find out what successful customers did when they adopted, right? Down to details that you might think of as trivial, like how did they roll it out to the staff? Did they have a pizza lunch? Did they do webinars? Did they incentivize it? Was there a contest associated with adopting the new solution? Those details might seem really trivial, but you will find, especially if you can compare successful and unsuccessful customers, the successful customers tend to be really good at the simple act of rolling out process or solution into their company. And if I want to help those who have consistently not been as successful, I can learn a lot about what kind of rollout, what kind of behaviors, who needs to be involved, how to incentivize engagement, et cetera, and package that up. I actually like very much to take a onboarding process that's largely geared toward training on the solution, which I consider to be very low leverage for customer success, and shift all that time. Put the training, if you can, on videos or some webinars, or do it as a side thing. Take most of my human interaction time and focus it around making sure we're aligned about purpose and success, what it looks like. And then here's how successful companies, push this out and have good results with it. Here's the kind of rollout behaviors, et cetera. Those details turn out to be incredibly valuable. We shouldn't forget our customers need and want that from us. They don't just need technology. They know they're going to struggle. One of the reasons why customers have a hard time buying and buying cycles can extend isn't because of a lack of faith in your solution or that it's able to do great things, but a lack of faith in themselves. They've seen how they've failed consistently in other projects, and that's part of the anxiety they're going through at the end of a sale. Well, one of the things we can do is show them that we have a process that doesn't just turn the software on effectively, but actually guides them through the behavior change process change, and rollout and engagement. And we have all that kind of expertise to wrap around that we've learned from our most successful customers. The whole combination is, yes, now we're aligned around the core business opportunity or objective, and we have the expertise to help guide you through a successful rollout.
You've given us two good strategies for engaging with our customers and making sure that they're successful. Is there a third one?
Yeah. In fact, there's a really important one. One of the things I learned early on, once I started asking the right question, is that one of the best signals about whether a customer is going to stay versus leave has to do with their post close behavior, and in particular, expanding. So when I go to a client now and I see a customer success motion that's really designed around retaining revenue, those don't tend to perform very well in terms of retention, which is ironic. But if I go and I see a customer success team really driven by an expansion oriented mentality, they tend to get retention for free. So that's become kind of a mantra for me. Don't focus on the retention. Look at expansion. Now, expansion, I don't want to think of it narrowly just as selling more to the customer. It does include that, and we shouldn't discount that. But I want to think more broadly, which is why I use the term velocity, right? This includes every way in which we drive for our customers higher and higher results over time. If you think about it, if you create value and it's clear and everybody agrees it was good value, but you stay at that level for an extended period of time, eventually that customer is going to churn. No organization is static, right? Their needs evolve and change. The market will evolve and change. There will be different options. And eventually, if nothing else, they're going to want something else to brag about or get excited about. So you absolutely have to understand something, which is so core. It's the name of my business. It's the name of my whole practice and methodology, which I call client velocity. It's the ability to take ownership over the long run, not just of some initial value or some initial win that you can deliver to your customers, but consistently repeating that experience forever. If you look at the great, SaaS companies that are really killing it, and there aren't many, honestly, they're a small group. They're the ones who've taken that on as a kind of core self-identity even. Every year a new story about what kind of value they're creating. They engage with their customers individually to see what the opportunities are for them. and to drive more velocity. So velocity includes, could be new features that are in the product that allow you to obtain better results. It could be new modules you could buy that would allow you to take on and expand the use case for that customer. It could be just taking what we have and applying it to more users, or using it more effectively, or finding more process change. It's everything that drives, increasing value period after period for the customer. Because here's the thing, customers don't renew because of what you did for them. They renew because of what you're going to do for them. And what you did for them makes that promise credible. And so, in my view, this idea of velocity is actually in some ways the purest way to understand whether a customer success, whether a whole company really is aligned around customer success. They'll drive continuous expansion in the value for each customer. That will show up in some ways as paid expansion, because buying signals are very sacred, right? It's important that we're always aligning with the customer what matters to them, and it's not a minor issue to make sure that that we're aligned, and buying signals are one of the important ways we do that. But it's not limited to that. It's a general sense that we have to continue to drive more value. We can't just set it and forget it. It's a more kind of, it's taking ownership of the long-term kind of outcome of this customer, the journey they're going on. If we don't stay with them on that journey, they'll find someone else who will.
Can you give us some more tactics? Because like when I hear focusing on expansion, it's like, oh, that means our CSM should have a quota, and then they're not going to be good nurturing the customer. CSMs, they're going to be focusing on just getting more money, and if we don't do that, then they're not going to be focusing on expansion. And oh, by the way, they're not salespeople, so they're not used to doing this, so they don't want to do this. Like, help us with that.
Yeah, look, there's a whole bunch in there. Quick things I can say is I actually like a tandem sale where we have sales, the AE and the CSM working together, where the AE owns the close, but the CSM is really driving the value expansion and setting the stage for an appreciation for the next opportunity. So one of them is just getting a what's next mentality into our customer success teams, and that should bleed over into our sales teams as well. But that what next mentality is, okay, look, we accomplished it. We set this goal. We've got there. I can't wait. What's next? How are we going to take this to the next level? Again, it may not involve sales at all. It may just be, okay, great. Now let's spread this to the other departments, or let's change that other business process that's going to give you 20% more results. I just want that kind of mentality right on the CS side. On the other side, since selling them new things and getting that buying signal is not a trivial part of it, I also want to be thinking on a product level, how do we expand the horizontal breadth of our offering, right? What other modules could we offer that people could, choose to snap on here and add more value? So I'm not as big of a fan of a kind of customer of a product strategy that's just all in one price for everything we have. I do like some modular, separation, some things on the menu. And I also, so those are two things, right, that are pretty practical. And then maybe the last one is just going back to that first point. If it's not about happiness, what is it about, right? It's about success. If we're aligned around what the customer was hoping to get, what their quarter-inch hole is, we should be measuring it. And one of the most awesome things that I think a company can do without changing their product strategy, I mean, they could do this today. And it's very simple. Measure the customer's success, measure their success. And then every time you meet with them, whether it's in a quarterly review or monthly check-in or whatever, put that on the screen. Whether it's going up and to the right or not actually is less important than the fact that they see you signaling to them that you're actually aligned around their outcome. That's a really profoundly what I call bonding thing that companies do with their customers. The more you do that, in a lot of cases, I'm getting customer success managers to track it manually in Google Docs or something. It doesn't matter how elaborate it is. It signals something that's really important, and it keeps everybody focused on what matters. Then when a customer comes back and says, hey, we're really frustrated about this and we want you to add this feature, et cetera, everyone can say, okay, how does that relate to the goal we're trying to achieve? Oh, good, that's important. Or, okay, maybe that's not as important. Let's load it into our roadmap. But I'm glad we're focusing on what matters most. So measuring the customer's results, I call it measure and materialize, M&M, is one of the most bonding things you can do with customers, even before you make any profound change in your business strategy et cetera. And when I see customer success managers doing that, I really see lots higher retention and even a lot of good expansion behavior as well.
Greg, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for these insights. You've given us just so much, and it's brutal, honest stuff. Like we're not just, but we can't keep doing what we're doing. We've got to adapt and change as an industry, and I love these things. So, I mean, where can we follow you? You know, just if I wanted to learn more about your practices.
Yeah, so you can go to clientvelocity.com. Also on LinkedIn, Greg Daines. Link in with me. I'll be happy to meet everybody. I love keeping in touch with the global customer success community. And so I publish my articles on there, and I also publish on gregdaines.com. So look forward to meeting you all, and please reach out.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Another great episode of Successfully Live.